The air inside the boutique smelled like polished glass, expensive leather, and artificial exclusivity. Every light beam was intentional. Every hanger perfectly spaced. Every smile rehearsed. It was the kind of store where the receipt felt more valuable than the product, a place designed not just to sell but to remind certain people they didn't belong. When Jordan stepped inside, the whole room paused like a reflex. He was dressed casually clean, but ordinary. His hoodie was unbranded, his sneakers weren't trending, and his hair was in twists, pulled back into a knot like it always was when he didn't want to be bothered. He didn't come with an entourage or flash a watch or talk too loud. He just walked in quietly with purpose. He was shopping for his niece's birthday. She had circled a jacket in a magazine weeks ago, a limited piece from a collection only stocked by this chain in their flagship store downtown. So he went because he could, because he wanted to see her smile. But apparently walking in like he did as himself was a problem. At the register, the cashier raised an eyebrow as he approached. He politely asked if the seasonal promotion applied to the item. The woman behind the counter, not even bothering to scan it yet, scoffed and said, "No discounts for people like you." The words weren't whispered. They were spat. Like gum on concrete. Behind him, someone chuckled. Somewhere, a phone recorded. A manager in the back pretended not to hear. What no one knew, what would have stopped every breath in the store, was that Jordan wasn't just a customer. He wasn't a shopper, a browser, or a lost tourist. He was the owner. And he was about to remind them. Jordan hadn't always worn wealth like armor. In fact, he'd once learned that the quietest money was the most dangerous because it never had to announce itself. He had built his empire in silence, brick by digital brick, founding one of the largest logistics startups on the East Coast before his 30th birthday. A year later, his investment firm quietly acquired several lifestyle brands, one of which was the fashion label behind this very boutique. He never flaunted it. His name wasn't on the store window. But his money built the racks, funded the marketing, and covered every employee's payroll, including the one who just insulted him. But none of that was on his face that day. That day, he was just Jordan in a hoodie. As he stood there, staring at the woman behind the counter, he didn't flinch. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't ask to speak to anyone. Instead, he slowly placed the jacket back into its bag and asked for a receipt anyway. The woman looked confused, assuming her insult had worked, that another unwanted customer was leaving. She didn't know she had just passed a test. Or failed one. Jordan walked out calmly, receipt in hand, not because he needed it, but because he intended to remember. He passed 3 posters outside, all featuring models in clothes he technically owned. As he stepped back into his car, a sleek, unassuming black SUV, he tapped a contact in his phone under the name Internal Ops. He didn't need revenge. Just a meeting. The conference room was quiet except for the hum of the air conditioning and the buzz of expensive phones vibrating against marble. Jordan sat at the head of the table, his expression unreadable, the bag from the boutique placed beside him like evidence. His board looked around, unsure why this quarterly review had started with retail instead of revenue. He played the clip someone had sent him, the phone recording. The voice of the cashier echoed through the speaker, dripping with arrogance, "No discounts for people like you." A pause. A laugh. A silence of complicity. Nobody at the table said a word. Jordan finally leaned forward and pulled up the store's analytics, customer flow, conversion rates, staff retention, training audit logs. The store had been performing adequately, just barely. But hidden beneath the graphs was a more toxic truth: patterns of complaints, subtle racial profiling markers, and enough red flags to cover the entire boutique in metaphorical blood. "I don't believe in speeches," Jordan finally said. "I believe in consequences." By the end of the meeting, the decision was made. The store would remain open. The staff would not. But that wasn't the real consequence. That would come later when Jordan decided to walk back in. 2 days later, the store opened as usual. The lights were bright. The music was ambient. The new seasonal collection had arrived and the front display sparkled under spotlights like some kind of shrine. But something was different. Customers noticed new staff. A different tone. A new poster near the entrance with a statement about inclusion and equity. And most of all, a sign above the register. Under new management. Jordan walked in just before noon, again dressed simply, though now accompanied by a silent woman in a suit, his head of operations. Behind the counter was the regional manager, hastily reassigned to support during the restructure. No one recognized him, not at first. Then one of the stylists, a young man from corporate who had once seen Jordan in a meeting months ago, froze in mid-step. He whispered to a colleague. The whisper became a ripple. The ripple became stillness. And when the cashier who had once dismissed him appeared from the back to collect her last paycheck, she finally locked eyes with the man she thought was nobody. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. His presence was a mirror, and in it they all saw who they really were. He turned not toward the exit this time, but toward the VIP lounge in the back, a space no customer had ever entered before. Now it bore his name on a brass plate by the door. The boutique had always relied on illusion, on curated identity, imagined exclusivity, and the unspoken language of who belonged and who didn't. The walls weren't built to keep people out physically. They were emotional walls, social ones wrapped in velvet but braced with steel. They had kept people like Jordan on the outside for years, not by policy, but by posture. Now, for the first time, the walls were forced to hold a different kind of weight. Jordan's presence shifted the gravitational center of the store. He wasn't speaking, but everything around him was reacting. The once arrogant cashier avoided eye contact, her hands visibly shaking as she completed her final paperwork in the manager's office. Employees whispered in the corners, unsure of what to say, unsure of who he was beyond the rumor that had exploded within the company over the past 48 hours. The man they insulted was not only the owner he had been watching for a long time. He walked through the boutique slowly, inspecting not the products, but the people. He observed how staff greeted guests. He watched who they made eye contact with and who they didn't. He saw the way some smiled out of fear, others out of habit, and a few with genuine grace. He remembered faces, not to punish, but to rebuild. The problem wasn't just one employee, it was the environment. One woman's disrespect had been allowed to flourish because no one ever told her it was unacceptable. And those who let it grow? They had just built a prettier cage. A young black woman entered the store near the afternoon. She wore a bright red coat and walked with hesitation, holding a printed coupon she had found online. The kind of person the old staff would have dismissed on sight. Jordan stopped near the register and watched. This time, the new cashier smiled, scanned the jacket she picked, and honored the discount without flinching. The woman's eyes lit up in disbelief. Not because the discount worked, but because no one challenged her existence. Jordan gave a small nod and turned away. In that moment, he wasn't just an owner reclaiming control. He was undoing an entire architecture of subtle exclusion, one smile at a time. By the end of the week, the story had left the boutique and reached the rest of the city, not by press release, not by scandal, but by something stronger, whispered truth. The phone video had gone viral in certain circles, accompanied by captions that speculated and headlines that danced around the real issue. But the full weight of it came when someone on social media made the connection between the man in the hoodie and the LLC listed on the brand's parent company website. From there, it was wildfire. The story wasn't just about a discount denied, it was about a system exposed. A man had been dismissed based on his appearance, only to reveal himself as the silent architect behind the very structure that dismissed him. News outlets caught on. Think pieces were written. The owner in the hoodie, one article titled it, "The Quiet Billionaire," another called him. But Jordan never responded to requests for interviews. He didn't need validation. The truth had already done its work. Inside the company, everything changed. Training protocols were rewritten. Staff-wide equity audits were launched. Regional managers were rotated. But more than policy, a tone had shifted. The fear of consequence had given way to the promise of accountability. Jordan had set the example not with punishment, but with presence. Meanwhile, Jordan visited the boutique again, this time with his niece. She danced through the store like she owned it, pointing at displays and trying on jackets. The staff, freshly trained and painfully aware of who she was, treated her like royalty, not out of fear but reverence. Jordan watched from a distance as his niece spun in front of a mirror, the same one that once reflected judgment and exclusion. Now it caught her laughter. He had turned a battlefield into a playground. And he wasn't finished. Months passed. The boutique had become something else. Not a showroom for wealth, but a model for change. Other branches followed suit. Subtle arrogance gave way to intentional service. Brand loyalty increased. Complaints dropped. Revenue climbed. Investors, once wary of controversy, now praised the bold modernization of company culture, unaware that what they were celebrating was nothing more than basic human decency, reintroduced by force. Jordan never bragged. He didn't sit for photo shoots or allow his image to be used for branding. He refused to become the face of the transformation, insisting that the focus remain on the system, not the man. But for those who knew, for those who paid attention, he had become a legend. Other business owners took note. Quiet policies began to shift. A wave of internal accountability emerged across sectors: retail, hospitality, even finance. Jordan's story became a case study in quiet power. And for him, life returned to normal, or at least his version of it. He continued his work, funded new startups, and invested in people who reminded him of himself. Underestimated, overlooked, and ready. Sometimes he walked into his own store, sometimes in a suit, sometimes in a hoodie. He spoke little, watched more, and always left quietly. He didn't need to be seen. He had already been heard, not with a shout, but with silence that echoed across walls built to exclude. The world often told people like him to stay in their place. So he bought the building.